And what is going on, Colts Nation? Welcome back to another episode of Bring the Juice. Here, guys, Derek and Cody with you as always. And today, guys, we're going to be talking about the safety market and what the Colts can do. But before we get into that, we just wanted to say that this episode today is presented by Prize Picks. Make sure to go to prizepicks.com and use code BTJ for a $100 deposit match when you sign up. The link for that is in the description, so please be sure to check that out. But like we said, guys, today we're going to look at the safety market. We're trying to figure out what the Indianapolis Colts need to do with the remainder of free agency and potentially the draft, and whether or not we're going to see the Indianapolis Colts making a move on that beforehand. But I mean, Cody, there's a couple things going through right now with the safety market. We all know that this whole L'Jarius Sneed thing is what's holding this up right now because we're trying to see how much cap will remain if we end up signing him. So it's kind of one of those situations where it's a waiting game for the Colts right now. But we have seen a lot of good safeties go off the market, but there is a couple more. But before we hop into those actual names, I did want to ask you, do you see a scenario, even potentially if you brought back Julian Blackmon, do you see a scenario where Ballard does not bring in an additional safety to try and booster the backfield a little bit and just run it back with either Rodney Thomas or Nick Cross out there?
I really doubt it, Derek. I mean, based off of what we've seen with the Colts' perceived interest in both Justin Simmons and Quandre Diggs, I mean, it would be tough for me to say that the Colts would do that, just because it was such a liability last year. And it seems like, and again, you talked about the L'Jarius Sneed situation. One would wonder, this is not me breaking anything, but I'm like, if the Colts were truly out on L'Jarius Sneed, you think they would just have moved on at this point and signed another veteran corner and probably signed, some of these safeties. But anyway, when it comes to that, I don't see a scenario, Derek, where that does happen. I personally see it rather that Indianapolis would, I do just feel like they aren't content with where they are at free safety. Just because, again, you like a lot of what especially Nick Cross did last year. But again, Derek, it was so inconsistent. And again, you had moments where, your safeties cost you some games, to be honest with you. Really your whole secondary at times cost you games last year with the youth and experience and honestly just who you put out there in certain ways from a talent perspective. And so, no, I don't necessarily see it, Derek. But again, like you said, if/when, we don't know 100%. And honestly, I'm at that point, Derek, where both people, it feels like there's two different sides, people hearing completely different things. So I don't want to even talk about it until we figure out one way or another. But if they were, say, theoretically, able to bring in L'Jarius Sneed, then you do have to figure out some contract stuff, potentially cutting a couple players, restructuring a few things, and all that kind of stuff. And so that's kind of what I think is probably the holdup a little bit when it comes to that. But I just don't see a scenario, Derek, especially at free safety, where it was such an issue last year for the Colts to just be like, let's run it back. I just don't see that being a scenario where that is, especially considering they're not just interested in one player, but two players at free safety. I have to believe that one of those guys, once this whole situation hopefully figures it out here in the next day or two, I'm have to believe one of those guys is an Indianapolis Colt, and they just bring him in, for a couple of years. I know both these guys, Simmons and, Quandre Diggs, are both, 30, 31 years old. And so it's not a long-term solution per se, but it could be a good, couple of years solution there for Indianapolis and in potentially getting some high play from the free safety position, which honestly, Derek, you haven't had in a couple of years. So, yeah, for me, I definitely believe that Indianapolis will upgrade at free safety, even if that means bringing back Julian Blackmon. From what I understand, it feels like they're letting Julian Blackmon kind of test the market, see what his value is, and then saying, hey, kind of tell us what you're being valued out there, and maybe we can come to an agreement then. Again, I don't know 100% on that, but that's kind of the vibes I'm getting from the whole Julian Blackmon situation. Yeah. But when it comes to free safety, I really do believe Indianapolis will upgrade and we'll get more of a proven veteran in there. It makes a lot of sense from all those aspects. And I think it would just tremendously help your defense as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a lot of questions to be had with this. I was the same as you, I don't think that I definitely don't think Ballard should allow that to happen. I will say this, though. We have seen times where Ballard's confidence in a particular group of people is very, very strong. And I have a feeling the safety market might be that, mainly just because we haven't seen any situation yet where Ballard has even attempted to free up any cap one way or the other, regardless if you're going to get Snead or not. I would still think there's a lot of opportunities here that Ballard could have done to try and boost this roster up by just freeing up like anywhere from 10 million to 20 million in cap just from that. But he has refused to do so far. And I
Well, I mean, it is
would like
still early though, Derek. We're not even a
that is
week into
true.
free agency, and the
I
market,
understand that. I've just seen a lot of these other teams. Some other teams have definitely already started on trying to free up cap. We obviously saw what the Kansas City Chiefs did with Patrick Mahomes' contract to be able to bring in a couple different other pieces to help boost their team up. I understand it's early, and we always say that Ballard is an extremely patient person. So hey, maybe he could teach me a thing or two on patience. I could probably use some help with that. But
well, I would say, Derek, though, honestly, if we get to, near the draft and the Colts haven't addressed safety at all, then we have to have another conversation, right? But I guess until all the quality safeties are gone, and like we said, there's still a good number of them, including Julian Blackman. Now, I know guys like Xavier McKinney and Cameron Curl, some of those guys are gone. Obviously, some of the Curl just a couple days ago, and obviously McKinney very early into free agency. But some of the guys the Colts have been linked to or had or spoken to, I guess, are still out there and still available. And so I'm not going to, I guess, necessarily crucify Ballard yet, unless he just outright doesn't sign anybody and we run it back. Even if he re-signs Julian Blackman and they run it back, I think it's still kind of putting your faith in some unproven talent. And I know like the offensive line, that's an easy comparison to make. But Derek, that offensive line actually had some history of some high play. You haven't
yeah,
seen that, consistently from your young free safeties yet. And so I guess for me, it's like, you have some proven talent out there. It makes a whole lot of sense, especially with a guy like Quandre Diggs, who obviously, Derek, is a Seattle guy and, kind of has a similar style to kind of how Gus Bradley's defense runs. And so you feel like that's a pretty good fit schematically for a guy like Quandre Diggs and all that. But yeah, I mean, overall, though, I'm not going to go there yet. Again, we still have some time. And if both these safeties and all these guys are gone and the Indianapolis Colts don't really have an answer, and you're running out Ronnie Harrison Jr. and Nick Cross, like we have a problem then. But I
yes.
guess for me, I'm kind of just like, I'm in the wait and see game. And again, like you mentioned, I think at the beginning, I do wonder if the Jerry Snead domino, whether Indianapolis gets him or not, is kind of where, after that happens, Indianapolis will go after, and get some actual other veterans, because we saw them, the first couple days really of free agency, they didn't go crazy, obviously. They re-signed a lot of guys, brought in a couple depth guys and everything like that. But then they've gone cold over the last number of days. Like we haven't seen a single activity from the Indianapolis Colts. And so it's interesting how that kind of is right now at that place. But for me, yeah, man, it really does come down to, what happens with this domino. And once it falls one way or the other, if he goes back or if he comes to Indy or he gets traded somewhere else, I mean, we see reports everywhere, right? So you don't really know 100% right now. But regardless of what happens, I do think after that domino falls, we'll start to see some movement at some safeties, hopefully for Indianapolis to add, one free safety and potentially even bring back Blackman. That would be great. So, but again, it is a waiting game, and I understand completely what you're saying, man. I hate waiting. I hate kind of being in that limbo period where you don't 100% know one way or another. You're like, I could believe this. I could think this is going to happen, or I could think this is going to happen. It really is kind of that emotional roller coaster. It's been that for the last, 24, 48 hours of ups and downs. And you think we're going one way, and then all of a sudden, nope, going back down. It's been one of those kind of crazy sort of things for, I think, just everybody, not just fans, but like for media as well. It's been just that kind of, crazy type of thing. So again, I think we're all going to be happy when this saga kind of whatever happens. I mean, I'm just ready for it to happen, whatever it is. I just want an answer. I know everybody just wants an answer.
Yeah.
Everybody's tired, man. I put that. Are you a SpongeBob person? Like, do you watch SpongeBob?
Oh, of course. I don't know if there's
Okay.
many people on the planet that are bigger SpongeBob people than me.
So you're going to understand what I said. So I posted something on Twitter, and I think it's just perfect. It's like that when they open 24 hours, and it's just like day 43 or whatever. Like that's how it's felt, man. It's like days upon days where it feels like it's just dragging on. But that really is how it felt, over the last couple days. And even since we got the initial report, right, about the Colts' interest potentially in L'Jarius Sneed. Yeah, right there.
Yeah,
give it up. That's
for day 31.
That's really how it has felt, man. Honestly, that's how it's felt. And so, yeah.
It feels right
so
now.
We're ready, man, for the situation to just be resolved. But I do think Indianapolis will add, to answer your question. I do think they'll add at free safety. I just have this feeling.
I mean, are we both in agreement right here, just off the top, that in no circumstance should Ballard be looking to improve the safety room by getting one in the draft? Like, I'm anti-spend a draft pick on any safety. You have spent so many draft picks on safeties over the last two years. Your entire safety room at this moment in time is all safeties that you have drafted in the last 2 years. So I'm just like, if you're going to draft another safety just to compete with it, then why not just keep the ones that you're there trying? Like, honestly, it just makes no sense to do one. And I'm like, the only way you would get a safety is if you're doing it in free agency. It's the only way that makes sense. As we said, guys, today's episode is sponsored by Prize Picks. Now, what is Prize Picks? Prize Picks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. Instead of battling against thousands of other players across platforms, you're basically picking 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you're choosing more or less on those stat projections to be able to watch those winnings roll in. It's very easy. Do you guys want to play along at some of Prize Picks' favorite players like rapper Meek Mill and UFC fighter Sugar Sean O'Malley? Well, if you guys sign up today, you can find the community plays under the promos tab of the app to view the entries of some of the biggest names on the platform and be a part of that as well. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000 just like that with NBA, NHL, and college basketball entries today on Prize Picks, America's #1 fantasy sports app. Like a lot of other things, guys, they also offer injury insurance, so your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. So if someone exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second, that player projection won't count against you and the rest of your entry stays live. So it's great bounce back for that one. What I love about the app as well, guys, is it's not just sports like NBA, NHL, football, and tennis, and baseball, and all these other things, but there's also a lot of others that go into it as well. If you like to place entries on video game situations like Call of Duty, CS2, Apex, if that's something that appeals to you, there's a wide variety of sports and video games and everything else that you can place entries on. And I love how expansive it is. Even just looking at the NBA, there's entries you can make with turnovers, with points. You can do combo deals, dunks, field goals attempted, all of these different things. So there's just so many different ways to make money off of these entries. Be sure to download the app today and use code BTJ for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, download the app today and use code BTJ for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, it's sponsored by Prize Picks. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy.
Right. And I mean, from people who are very invested in the draft, a lot more than you and I are, we've heard how weak this safety class is in general. Now, I'm not saying, you can always find quality players at any position in the draft, but it does seem like compared to how the free agency class was, it seems like free agency is the route to go if you want a starting safety. Like that's just kind of how it's appearing, and it just seems like it's aligning that way where that would make the most sense for the Colts. And we already mentioned a couple guys in addition to Blackman, but Derek, there's other players as well that you could potentially be interested in if you're the Indianapolis Colts. Who are some players that you, outside of the three that we talked about, any other guys that you would be interested in at all of adding a veteran at that free safety position?
Yeah, so I mean, looking just at the remaining guys, right? Justin Simmons' name is still there. I know a lot of people have been pointing to Justin Simmons, who, quite honestly, Cody, might end up being the highest paid safety left on the market, to be honest, because, yes, he is 30 years old, but over the last 3 seasons has been an all pro all 3 of those seasons. So this guy still has some great pedigree to him, which is why he's probably taken a while because, he's waiting for the right kind of deal. And you're right, outside of 3 safeties, Cody, not a single safety in this market has hit the $20 million mark. Brandon Jones, who's the 26-year-old out of Miami that went to Denver, he got a 3-year contract worth 20 mil. Darnell Savage, who's now going to Jacksonville, got a 3-year, almost $22 million deal. And then, of course, the mega deal in Xavier McKinney, who got the 4-year, $67 million deal. So outside of that, this safety market, it's not been huge. There's not been a lot of guys that are getting high compensation for this stuff. And I'll tell you what, for Julian Blackman's sake, I'd like to say he definitely beats out Rayshawn Jenkins. I'd like to think he probably gets similar to Geno Stone kind of deal. So my guess is if Ballard's going to get him, my guess is he's probably going to sign him to like a 3-year, like probably something similar to Brandon Jones's contract because he's 26. He's been productive. Yes, he's had a few years where he's had some injuries, but I mean, I think his deal is going to be very similar to Brandon Jones's, which will put him right at third or fourth on the safety market for the remainder of it. But of course, like we said, Quandre Diggs, another name that has been linked to the Indianapolis Colts, and there's definitely mutual interest there because Diggs has been mentioned on Twitter by Zaire Franklin specifically. And Diggs has even responded to a couple of the things, stating that he is interested in the Colts. So that's no question there. As far as like any other safeties, there's a couple that definitely could be very interesting. Like I said, the main guys that I would want Indy to try to go for is for Diggs and Simmons and Blackman. Now, I also wouldn't mind Marcus May either, who just got put on the safety market by New Orleans because of a recent cap cut. So, I mean, there's a couple good names still left on here that I wouldn't mind. Well, I'll tell you what, man, a couple of these deals really, really destroyed me, man. Like Chauncey Gardner going back to Philly. You talk about Jeremy Chin for that really low deal for Washington. And we talk about Cameron Curl, who was a huge guy that you were talking about. He's going to the Rams for less than $4.5 million a year. So there's been quite a few safeties that we've talked about that we kind of wanted to be on this team, but it just didn't turn out that way. So I'm hoping the Colts can make one more splash move in the safety room before the draft gets here.
Yeah, and again, I'm kind of to the point where I'm like, regardless of what happens, with that whole deal, with L'Jarius Sneed, if that happens or not, I mean, I honestly, if you add a veteran corner, whether it's him, whether it's somebody else, I know a lot of people have said Ahkello Witherspoon as well, who could be an option if that deal doesn't, necessarily work. And then, you sign, kind of make your splash, quote unquote, at the free safety position. bring back Julian Blackmon, and then boom, all of a sudden, there you go. You're going to the draft and you feel fairly good about your roster moving forward, when it comes to free agency. And so, but as it stands with the safeties, I do think they need to make kind of a bigger-ish move for one of those safeties. And it feels like Quandre Diggs probably fits a little bit better schematically. But obviously, Justin Simmons right now is the best safety on the market. So if you got him, you'd feel really, really excited about what he can provide for the next number of seasons for you. But again, Derek, it does come down to cap. It really does. And, whatever happens here, that will kind of dictate a little bit what Indianapolis can and can't do and what they might be forced to do when it comes to restructuring some things before they can maybe even, add to that safety room. So we shall see, Derek. It's going to be interesting to see what happens with the safety room here. But, it's funny. We said we're going to stop talking about the Snead situation. We still didn't. We still had to talk about it a little bit because it does influence, really, Derek, what you're potentially able to do. And like we said, kind of some of the dominoes that might fall, because of this and when this does happen or not. And we do get a clear answer on this. So we shall see, though, but definitely think the Colts would be wise to add a veteran in there at free safety, and hopefully they can get Julian Blackmon back. Like we said, when he's healthy, Derek, he is so valuable to what the Colts do on their defense, and he was so good last year. I believe he led the Colts in interceptions last year, and he stealed a couple games for the Colts last year. So I think the Colts would be wise to bring him back, but we will check and keep on monitoring this safety room, guys. So let us know your overall thoughts here on the safety room, remaining guys here for the Indianapolis Colts. Who would you like to see the Colts go after here at the free safety position? Are you more of a Justin Simmons or a Quandre Diggs person? Would you like a guy like Marcus May, or is there another, free agent that we didn't even talk about that you would want to go on the Indianapolis Colts to pursue? Let us know all those things in the comments down below. But guys, that'll do it for this one. Thank you so much for tuning in. We really do appreciate it. And as always, guys, go Colts.